Hi, everyone. This is Daniel Rodic here with our latest episode of Partner Pulse. For those who haven't met before, I am the head of market development here at Clearco, part of our partnerships team. Before this, I've been a founder my whole life, working with a lot of the great brands and companies that we'll learn about today with the team at THG Ingenuity and Alex Bates. Alex, how are you doing today?
I am very well, thanks, Dan. Very well. It's a little bit of a grey, rainy day here in London where I'm based, but otherwise, no, all well. Busy week, and yeah, everything is well and positive in the world of THG.
That's great. Do you have? I guess it's Thursday. Do you have exciting plans coming up for the weekend? What do you have in mind?
What do I have in mind? Meeting some friends tomorrow from my old job who I haven't seen in ages, so really looking forward to that. And also a friend's wedding too, so lots of social engagement. So yeah, it might be kind of a bit tricky getting back into work mode on Monday, but we'll
make it to the Thursday productive, and then we can worry about
that. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it'd be great before we jump into THG and all your work there. Would love to know just a bit more about yourself, and you mentioned meeting some of your colleagues from your last place. What's the story of how you got to THG and why you decided to join this great company?
Yeah, really good question. And also, firstly, before we jump in, thank you so much for having me on the session today, Dan. I've been really looking forward to this, and just so excited to have this opportunity to talk about our partnership and our work together. So yeah, I head up partnerships here at THG Ingenuity. I've been in the role for about a year now. And the partnerships organ, our focus here is fairly broad, looking at how we can grow and how we can identify and how we can scale relationships with key partners across tech, finance, across agency, payments, all different areas. But before that, my background was very much in performance marketing and performance marketing tech. So looking at how kind of brands, retailers, agencies, all sorts of different advertisers could help to maximize their spend across key channels like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Instagram, kind of really digging into the data, making really strong recommendations, and just delivering really strong performance for them across all of these key channels.
Very cool. Very cool. And for THG, for those who are not familiar with the origins of this, and then THG Ingenuity, which is kind of a newer division in the whole group, tell us a bit more about that, because I think the company overall I've been fascinated with. I did a lot of work with the group in my last company, but a lot has evolved since my conversations a few years ago.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think it's of course evidently one of the first questions people ask when they kind of maybe start working with us or find out a bit more about us. And I guess the first thing I'd say is that we are one THG family, right? It's THG and THG Ingenuity, and we're all sitting under the same umbrella. But I think to really understand what is THG Ingenuity and what kind of makes us a little bit different, it's really important, maybe more so than with other companies, to understand the journey that we've been on as a business, right? Because the journey that we've been on, that really informs what is, like I say, kind of the unique value prop and how we work with advertisers and customers and all sorts of things. So to take it right back to the beginning, we began life, 17 years ago now, up in Manchester in the UK. So we've been around for quite a while. And first and foremost, we were building, white label websites for large UK retailers in the really, really early days of e-commerce, selling stuff like books and would you believe it, Dan, CDs and DVDs online. So this is proper, like, really early stage stuff. And from there, that part of the business grew and grew and grew to the point where, and this is maybe, the first key stepping stone or milestone, however you want to call it, in our growth and our growth towards Ingenuity. We became a brand owner ourselves. So we started buying up brands and growing them and scaling them. And we now own and operate about 40 brands globally, primarily in health, in beauty, in nutrition and wellness. So there's THG, the brand owner, and that's kind of a really important thing to bear in mind. But for the purposes today, and for the purposes of our kind of growth as a group, we made our two real flagship acquisitions in 2011. These would look fantastic in MyProtein, which people on the call may or may not have heard. And when we acquired these brands, they were very small, UK-only brands, sort of £20 million GMV, selling in a single market. And over the 10 years or so that they've been part of THG and part of our family, these have grown from these very small localized players to being largely internationalized, about 65 and 75% respectively, I believe, and also the leaders in their field. So both turnover roughly in the region of £600 million a year last year. MyProtein is now the world's largest sports nutrition brand. Look Fantastic is, depending on how you know, one of the three largest beauty marketplaces internationally. So there's THG, the brand owner, and you know what we did develop over the sort of 20 years that we've been around as a business, as a brand owner, and we still, you know, continue to be acquisitive and acquire brands that we think have potential. You know, I'm not sure people might have seen in the news this week we announced the acquisition of Cold Beauty, which is very exciting. But what we did over that period of almost 20 years was we developed what was a really robust, very kind of strong, full end-to-end stack for running and building and scaling direct-to-consumer e-commerce in multiple different markets. So if you think about that journey that we went on with Look Fantastic and MyProtein, taking them from single market to multiple different markets, helping them expand, all of the technology, all of the operations, and all of the digital side of things that was necessary to grow those. What we've done is we've essentially packaged those up, externalized them, and that is THG Ingenuity. So it's all of the product that was developed, you know, through trial and error, through understanding what it takes to grow brands internationally, you know, going through all of those mistakes and things that people go through when they are looking to expand and grow into new markets. We now work with some of the world's largest brands to fuel their direct consumer e-commerce fully end to end. So we are a brand owner and we operate some of the world's largest brands, but we take that technology, that nous, that expertise, we've used it to form THG Ingenuity, which is now the B2B e-commerce and technology division of the Hut Group.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty crazy. This is my favorite type of innovations. If it's something that's you know, battle tested internally. A lot of actually amazing you know, companies like Slack is a great example.
Yeah.
You know, started as technology that was used as an internal communication tool for a games company, and now all of a sudden it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And you know, THG Ingenuity is another great example of that. And what really excites me about what you've built, it's you know, most founders would never be able to get access to something like this. Think about all the trial and error of 17 years of doing this, all the resources, all the cost of building infrastructure. If you think through, like, what kind of brand should be thinking about this as a solution? Like, can you kind of paint a picture of where should they be in their life cycle? When, you know, when would they get most value of using something as holistic as the THG Ingenuity engine that you've built?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and to be honest, you know, there are a number of different use cases and different things that we can support. I think for us, and the way that we work with brands and the brands that we kind of partner with very well, because you know, when we are working with a brand and we're helping them to build their DTC, we're helping them to scale internationally. You know, we do think of it as a true partnership, right? And we're all bought in and we're all pushing to the same way. For us to partner with a brand, really, first and foremost, we look for brands who are very serious about direct-to-consumer e-commerce. So you know, maybe they're smaller now. But you know, they have this really strong strategy and they know where they want to be. They want DTC to be at the core part of their expansion. Maybe they kind of have a rough idea about what they want to do and where they want to be in however many years' time. But you know, DTC is a really core part of that. So brands are looking to expand internationally very, very quickly because of the nature of the stack and the nature that we built. You know, what we can do is really reduce a lot of these barriers to entry, which I guess we can talk about a bit more in a sec. So I think at the heart of, you know, brands we work with, well, it's ones that want to move quickly, you know, that really want to build something, you know, a little bit different, a little bit special, and that want to be in multiple different markets. Again, you know, we wouldn't say that there is a particular, you know, number of employees you need to have or whatever. You know, yes, we do tend to work better with slightly larger scale businesses. That is certainly true. But generally speaking, just kind of a real need and a want and a focus on DTC as part of your core business proposition is what we look for.
And in terms of the product category or type, I imagine there are certain challenges in terms of, like, how do I deal with translation? How do I deal with customer service? How do I deal with taxation, VAT, registration? From your experience observing a lot of the folks you've worked with, what are the hardest things that a brand you think is going to face once they decide to go global, so that, you know, they can kind of self-identify, are these problems I actually want to deal with?
Yeah, that fantastic question, and I think it's kind of useful to maybe use that model which I touched on, you know, very briefly when I was talking about what is Ingenuity and where have we come from. Where, you know, the way that we look at DTC e-commerce, we split into really three core areas, right? So there is technology, when you look at your core commerce engine, analytics, fraud, payment, stuff like that. The operational side of things, of course, like warehousing, 3PLs, couriers, production. Customer service as well, of course, is hugely important. Then there's also the digital side of things as well. So trading and merchandising, performance marketing, creative, all these different areas. I think within these kind of three core divisions of a DTC stack, right, that there are certain challenges which we commonly see. brands facing. I think, if we look at the tech side of things, one thing that is hugely important to consider is payments and payment methods, right? Because I think maybe brands, if they've been successful in one market, maybe they're hooked into, really wonderful technologies like PayPal or Stripe, which gives like really great coverage globally. But maybe there is kind of a challenge or almost like a lack of consideration in understanding which payment methods, are really going to be able to allow consumers to convert seamlessly in different markets, right? Consumers want to convert and pay in different ways depending on where you're on the globe. And, what works in one market isn't necessarily going to capture the audience in its entirety in another market. So like, let's look at Japan and the Middle East, for example, where, cash on delivery is still a really popular method of payment, or, the UK or in Europe, where in the last, maybe a year and a half or so, buy now, pay later have been a really big thing, and even evolving towards stuff like open banking and crypto. So I think a challenge we often see, and you can imagine there could be massive drop-offs in conversion rates, right? If someone is in your site, they're like, "Okay, fantastic, I want this product," and you get to check out and you're not able to check out in the method that you want to pay with. So plugging into the right payment methods, I think is absolutely is super important. I think operationally, you touched upon a lot of issues there. I think stuff like HS code determination, tax determination, things like that, particularly with, current issue stuff like Brexit has been a big challenge for a lot of brands we've worked with, right, where things have changed not necessarily overnight, but very quickly in terms of import and export. So, really being able to kind of assess and understand those duties as you're going into new markets. I think being able to plug into the right couriers in the right methods as well, and kind of getting an understanding of the nuances of what the expectations are in certain markets and how you can integrate with partners to do that. So, there might be markets that people expand into. Russia is a good example where we've had a lot of success with partners and brands, where there is a slightly different expectation in cross-border products coming in, and people might be happy to wait 3 or 5 days for a product, and that's fine. There are people who can support that, but other markets with a lot closer distribution networks, the US, UK, for example, people expect that delivery, so that's a challenge. And then I think another real kind of key challenge, which maybe people underestimate, is the importance of localizing your digital approach, right? So whether that is building the site, the copy on the site, the content, what works in one market, what works in Korea, might not work in India, might not work in Germany, might not work in the UK. And I think if brands take, almost this cookie cutter approach, right, and saying, "Oh yeah, we'll just replicate and use machine translation, it'll all be fine." Let's look at even, some of the world's biggest companies, right? Amazon, I'm sure you remember, Dan, when they launched in the Nordics in Sweden, there were massive problems where they basically took the site that they had elsewhere in Europe, used machine translation. It was terrible PR for them because it just simply didn't work. So taking that really strong kind of localized approach to digital as well, it can be difficult to do, and it can be, time consuming or resource intensive if you're arguably not using the right partners. But that can also present a challenge as well. And, you can really even get into the minutiae of stuff because DTC is so complex, right? Like customer service. Are you kind of able to offer the right channels and the right languages for customers in different markets? So, across tech, across operations, across digital, these are just some of the real kind of common barriers to entry that I think, brands do see.
Sorry, there's someone hammering above me, which is why it went on.
No worries.
The question I had was on, given all these different challenges that a brand, it's a very involved process, and you definitely need someone, if you're really going all out international, someone to quarterback this effort, whether it's someone in the C-suite or you assign someone to kind of figure out your non-domestic market. What are the, I guess the signs, or what do you think a brand needs to, what's the checklist? Let me put it that way. What's the checklist you think a brand needs to check off before they can self-identify to say, now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to go global. I can feel comfortable that there's a lot of work to be done, but I still have all the, I have the right resources and kind of stuff figured out to be successful at it.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting one, and I think I wish I had a list of completely sort of quantitative metrics that say once you have this GMV and this amount of users and this amount of stock and whatever, do this and fantastic, you're ready to expand internationally. But yeah, as I'm sure you will know better pretty much than anyone else, Dan, businesses are unique, products are unique, they differ massively, markets differ massively. So again, say there is this kind of cookie cutter approach, you take these things off and you're ready to expand internationally. It's almost impossible to take that approach. But what is possible to do is to focus on 2 key areas, I think, that can show a brand, you are really ready to expand international. And one is kind of understanding and looking at signals, from a digital perspective, and understanding trends and making sure that those aren't just one-offs. And also it might sound not necessarily counterintuitive, but a bit of a strange way to look at it, but also think about products as well, right? And product market fit. So kind of if we unpack the two of those individually, when we first look at signals, it sounds like a really basic thing to do. But I think brands might overlook sometimes the importance of really digging into their data when it comes to understanding, like traffic and interaction with their assets in multiple different markets. And using that to inform their internationalization strategies. So, even something as simple as kind of, understanding your traffic and your orders from your site, seeing is, not just kind of a blip from a certain market, which you weren't expecting, but is there a real constant and growing stream of interest over a period of time with both your website, but also, your social media as well? Are you getting a lot of interest, a lot of likes, a lot of new followers from a certain market? So dig into that data and make sure it's trends driven rather than just, you see a spike and then you act upon that. And then I think product market fit is such an interesting one. So, you might see people interested in your product in a certain market, but then it's kind of crucial to understand like how that's going to play into what consumers already have, right? So thing that we find is really strong recipes for success when entering into new market, and really strong signal that it's time to move into new market is understanding, what does the competition look like and what does the availability of your product look like. So a really nice example that I can give here is Pro Bike Kit, which is one of, a THG own brand, one of those 40 brands that I mentioned there. We expanded really successfully into the UAE because we saw, lots of signals and lots of interest, and that there was kind of, it was something that was driving a lot of traffic from, the locale. But at the same time, there wasn't really anyone else in market that was offering a similar product in terms of the brands, the parts, things like that. So this is kind of really strong dovetailing of, yes, there was, real kind of product driven interest, and there was kind of, I don't want to say a lack of competition, but, there was clearly demand being driven from somewhere. So I think understanding how your products fits into that broader local landscape, plus having that real strong data driven basis of, yes, there's been consistent interest and we can track back to this idea. That's kind of a really good catalyst for saying, okay, right, now is the time for us to expand into that market in particular.
Very cool. And maybe this would be a good time to talk through, you kind of already highlighted one case study, but talking a little bit about LMS and really the question I was going to ask is, for a brand who starts working with THG Ingenuity, what that experience is actually like, and how is it different than I'm just going to set up another storefront, I'm going to do all this manually. How is it different? And maybe LMS would be a great place to talk through that experience and a kind of a live case study of how you met them, why decide to work with you, and kind of the approach to get them international.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe, to take a bit of a step back and, to your point, Dan, around, what is it like when brands work with us? I think, kind of almost the paradigm for years and years and years when it comes to building DTC has been to take, what we call a piecemeal approach, right? So integrating with 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, gosh, sometimes like 40 different partners in order to build a stack that works. So you start with your core commerce engine and your hosting, and then you might add everything from app development to, social proof to kind of localization, tracking services, all these different parts of your tech stack. Payments, of course, we already mentioned, fraud, analytics. This is even before we've spoken about operations, warehousing, data centers, 3PLs, digital services, digital marketing, and all kind of like the don't say subgenres, but all kind of the different areas below that. So, traditionally that's been the way that brands have done things, and that presents 3 key challenges, right? The first is that it's costly. So each of these different kind of elements and each of these different plugins, it's either taking away from your kind of your profit margin, or it's adding an extra cost in. Secondly, it kind of increases risk and complexity. So if different parts of the stack fall out, if one part stops working, that has a knock-on effect elsewhere. And really, to the point of our conversation today, that makes it very difficult to internationalize, right? Because this kind of 25, 30 partner stack in order to grow internationally, that represents one market. There might be some elements you can translate across, but ultimately it's kind of something you then have to replicate in each different market as you go into, particularly to your point around stuff like tax determination, all these other areas. So these kind of present real barriers to building DTC and also expanding internationally. We're going back right to the beginning of what we mentioned. One of the first kind of key USPs for us is that, yes, we are a brand owner ourselves and we understand things. And the second one that we really highlight is that, the stack that we built is full and complete end to end. So essentially all the brands need in order to work with us is a product, and we can build everything from the site, the fraud, the analytics, logistics, digital marketing, all these different things. So that's really important. That's really important to understand in the context of, particularly LMS as a case study. They are a fantastic brand, for those of you who don't know, and I'm sure hopefully lots of people on the line have kind of either seen or used their products. They're part of L'Occitane Group. We started working with them, I think about a year ago, something like that. And when they came to us, they had this really strong, really well thought out plan for growing internationally and expanding and building their DTC, right? So I think it was over a period of a number of years, maybe 5 years potentially. They had 16 sites they were looking to launch, in really diverse locales everywhere from like Singapore to Malaysia to the Netherlands to Germany, all these different areas. And we first started working them, and all of the plans they made were perhaps predicated on this idea of kind of a piecemeal solution, a very, very slow rollout. But because we were able to kind of take a look at this plan and say, okay, great, we love what you guys were doing, we think it makes absolute sense. But by bringing everything together in one place rather than having to negotiate with multiple different partners in market, with multiple different couriers, 3PLs, payment methods, couriers, all these things, because we have these in one place, we've achieved economies of scale that they can tap into. What we were able to do was really condense that rollout. We were able to launch 12 sites in the first 8 months. I think it was. And beyond that as well, it was sort of positive 30% profitability over what they were projecting for those sites rollout. So we were really, really able to condense everything into a very short space of time, simply by having everything together in one place and giving them really one single point of contact. And to your point around like course backing, right? Just giving them one point of contact to be able to push things through. And I think the quote from the CEO and co-founder at Elamis was that working with THG, it was a game changer in cost efficiency and speed to market. So like I say, sort of shifting that paradigm in terms of how long things can take, what those barriers are, really reducing it, those barriers to market entry, making it quick and easy for them to expand internationally.
Mm-hmm. And you touched an interesting point on how integrated you are with them as a partner, which kind of goes back into organization design. And so if I'm a CEO or a founder of a business that's thinking about it, working with THG Ingenuity, how does that change the types of people I need to hire on my team? Are there roles that I don't need as many of, or is there a certain type of leader you typically want to work with on the founder side or company side that makes this work really well?
It really does vary depending on the size and scale of the business, right? If it's a small, as long as there's someone who is kind of really championing the cause of DTC and international DTC, right? That's the main thing for us. I think to your initial point around like hiring, we always see ourselves as an extension of our clients' team. And again, going back to this idea about like reducing barriers to entry, reducing friction points, reducing time and cost effectiveness, all these different things. So you think we touch upon all those different areas, right? Around particularly like digital marketing, around trading, around merchandising, fraud, analytics. For each of these different areas, you're going to have to hire multiple different people, right? You're going to have to bring in technology, all these different things. Whereas what we can offer, and I will say at this point, THG is modular as well. If you have an agency you love working with, great, that's fine. We can work with that. But really to kind of reduce those friction points when it comes to expanding internationally, not saying, okay, great, I'm looking to expand into Germany for the first time, I need to hire another 20 people. Because we have this expertise, because we have this knowledge, because we have 20 years of data that backs up, how we expand into different markets, we just act as a pure extension of your team. It allows you to do that, as I say, in a much kind of quicker, easier way, without having to go through the hiring process, integrating new tech, things like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's like another hidden value prop. We spend a lot of time with our founders, and one of our venture partners talks a lot about how you have to be very lean in your team approach to just preserve your unit economics. And so as much as you can rely on partners to do that, I think that's a hidden advantage many companies overlook.
We have one, quite large CPG customer, and we run, upwards of, I think, 30 different websites for them. They have, I believe it's just 1 or 2 account managers who manage all these properties. And you think, Dan, if you were managing, those number of websites in multiple different territories, how many people you would need to run that in-house? They can do it through just a very kind of tiny number of account managers on their side. And it just makes that role so much quicker and so much easier.
Yeah. So as we're coming up on time, I'd love to just get your perspective on what got you excited to partner with us at Clearco, and inevitably expanding international incurs a lot of costs. And that's what we always coach our founders to say, like, hey, international expansion should be a serious investment. What do you have to do? Think about your supply chain, think about software or strategic partners. What got you excited about working with us in our team?
Yeah, I think for me, there was such clear synergy between what we're both doing, right? And I think the kind of the phrase, the kind of the motto, apologies, Dan, whatever you guys want to call it, is this idea of like reimagine the way that you do business, right? And I think that is really where the intersection of THG and Clearco come together, because obviously you guys have done this incredible job of taking a look at the way that typically business is access capital, and they grow and think, no, that there is a better way of doing this that is more equitable, that this is quicker, that is kind of a lot slicker, and makes it easier for founders really to take control of their growth. Likewise, I think the way that we built Ingenuity is exactly along those same lines, right? You guys talk about fast and fair capital. LMS is a wonderful example of how we can really expedite and we can really speed up the process of expanding internationally, because we have all of those different really complex elements of DTC together in one place, and we make it incredibly more cost effective at the same time as well. So thinking that yes, traditionally people build piecemeal, they have multiple different partners, it's slow, it's complex, it's costly. Is there a better way to do this? Well, we would argue yes, through a partner that has over almost 20 years built out a stack that is purely there to support DTC e-commerce. We've been there, we understand it. Having everything together in one place is somewhat of a reimagining of the way that brands have traditionally done DTC. So thinking about that, reimagining this, is there a better way of doing this? And that kind of intersection of just making life easier for founders, for brands, for retailers, is what gets me really excited about what we're building here.
Yeah, no, I think that's why we're really excited to be working with you as well. We're noticing, especially as we've been operating in more and more international markets, is there's a lot of desire for European and countries out of APAC, companies out of APAC to expand to North America, and then vice versa. A lot of North American brands find that in foreign markets they are seeing lower costs of acquisition, lower marketing costs overall, and just a better competitive advantage in foreign markets. So I think we're very excited for our portfolio companies as well to see how they could work with a partner like yourself to go international. So maybe the last question I'd leave on is for someone who's very eager to go do this. It's like, hey, I love what I'm hearing here. I'd like to get started. Again, a few questions of what's the best way to engage with your group, and then in your experience, like how long does it typically take for someone to activate a new site, a new country? How should they think about this and planning their roadmap for when they can feel confident to operate into a new market?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think feel free to get in touch with us anytime. All the details are on our website. You can get in and kind of request contact with our sales team, and depending on where you're based, whether that's Europe, the US, APAC, wherever else, if you get in contact with us there, we can direct you to the right team, speak to your localized needs. And I'm sure, hopefully after this, Dan, we can share some contact details and point people to our site anyway. In terms of when's the right time to reach out, I would kind of go back to that point that we discussed earlier on around kind of really understanding those data-driven signals, really understanding your product fit in market. So, we can help, we can support in terms of strategy, but kind of understanding, okay, I do feel that this market is good and we want to expand here and we want to be building sites here, coming up with, at least that kind of, core of a plan and ideal that is backed up in real life data is a really nice place to be. In terms of those timelines, it kind of depends on the market and what people want to do. But, typically, we would say maybe, around 3 months, we can get everything up and running. And when we say up and running, that is couriers, that is sites, that is payment methods, that's digital marketing, everything in place. So, that's probably the sort of timelines that we would look at, as long as you have that really kind of strong strategy. We have done it quicker, of course, but that's just kind of indicative, what we would say in terms of a timeline. That's great. So what you're saying is if there's a very eager founder here who wants to open up a new market in time for the holidays, now is the time they got to come talk to you and get it going. Yeah, absolutely. We're getting to that point. So if there is anybody who is listening and wants to find out a bit more about internationalization, then we are always here, and absolutely delighted to have a conversation on where we can help. Amazing. Well, again, thank you, Alex, so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Incredibly excited for all the work we can do together. To everyone who's watching, thank you for tuning in. As you'll start to see with Clearco ourselves, we are slowly expanding to more and more countries and more markets to help founders everywhere. And inevitably, all the best brands and best companies will be global, will be selling international. And it's easier than ever to do that, thanks to folks like THG and the THG Ingenuity team. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll have another episode of Partner Pulse next week, and excited to see you guys there. Otherwise, Alex, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching. No worries. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, Dan. Amazing. Thanks so much.